Welcome to the podcast about being unmessable with, no matter what life throws at you. Here is your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio.
Hey there, welcome to Be Unmessable With the podcast. And my Unmessable With tip for the week starts with the whole world of complaining. So the question is, do you ever complain? Have you ever found yourself complaining about something or about someone in your life, or maybe even about yourself? It's something everybody does. And, I've worked with over 200,000 people over the last 30 plus years. And mostly when they complain about something, what happens is they end up suffering to some degree. Now, it doesn't have to be overt suffering, like, dramatic, but just unease, dis-ease, really, being irritated or putting up with something. And suffering can run the gamut of just being irritated to being all out, distraught. But here's the truth. Whatever you complain about, you end up suffering about to some degree. And if you really look in your life, when you complain about a coworker, when you complain about your weight, when you complain about your boss, your children, your spouse, your mother-in-law, it all ends up being like this low level of dissatisfaction, which I call suffering. Suffering is optional, and that's what I want to give you some tools for, is to disappear the suffering in your life, and your access is to see where you complain about things. So what I'm talking about today is choose it or change it, and how that can completely transform the quality and experience of your life. See, it's not about what your circumstances are. You're not going to change your mother-in-law. I mean, unless you get divorced and get a new mother-in-law, but that you're not going to change your DNA. You're not going to change certain things. You're not going to be changing, but you do always have the power to choose what is. Now that sounds crazy. It's like, I don't want to choose what is. I mean, if I'm sad, I don't want to choose being sad. I want to choose being happy, except that's crazy. You can't choose something that isn't real. You can create something that hasn't happened yet, but you can only choose what actually is. So, first thing is, complaining leads to suffering. We often find ourselves complaining about various aspects of our life, Sorry, I'm like choking to death, but I'm not complaining about it. I'm choosing choking to death. So we complain about our job. We complain about our relationships, our finances, whatever it is. This complaining, whether it's expressed openly or you're just complaining to yourself, it breeds dissatisfaction and suffering. It's like carrying around like this heaviness that weighs you down. So that's the first aspect of choose it or change it. The second aspect is to talk about choosing a little bit, because people think choosing means you like it or you want it. That's not what choosing is. I mean, just choose. It's like, this is what it is, and I'm choosing to have exactly what I have, including things like skin cancer or, you know, herniated discs or whatever it is. The more you resist, the more something persists. So choosing something doesn't necessarily mean you have to like it or love what you're choosing. Instead, what it means is you are taking responsibility as the author of your life rather than being the victim of a circumstance. So it's about acknowledging not that you have the power to decide your circumstances in all cases, but you do always have the power to decide how you respond to what life throws your way. When my mother had her stroke many years ago, I mean, this is like 18 years ago, I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this shouldn't have happened. This is terrible. If only we had done this, and if only she hadn't have done this. And all of that creates suffering. When I actually got related to reality, and what happened is she had a stroke, that's what happened. I'm not going to go back in time and change it. I'm literally going to not embrace like I'm happy about it, but I'm going to be with it exactly how it is. I'm going to choose that this is happening. That's different than accepting something. Accepting something is more kind of like it's coming at you and you are going to just succumb to it or deal with it or make it work. Choosing something is more proactive. It's like you're creating that this is what's happening. Not like it's your fault, not like you're to blame. It's a real nuanced thing and it takes a lot of practice. But the power of choice is when you actively choose something, you regain control. You become proactive rather than reactive. You become creative rather than reactive. And this shift in perspective empowers you to shape your own destiny. It's a declaration that I am no longer at the mercy of or messable with by external circumstances. This is happening, but it doesn't have to mess with you. You can create your response. You can create the space from which you take action. So being willing to commit 100% to choosing something is the only way to do this. You can't choose sort of. You can't be like a little bit pregnant on this. So once you choose something 100%, then you can get clear about what actions you need to take if you want to create a new space in your life, including creating a new circumstance. So if you choose how much money you have in the bank, let's say you have, I don't know, $100,000 in the bank, right? For some of you, that's like, oh, I wish I did. For some of you, that's like, well, that's not what I have. I have way more than that. But whatever number it is, fill in the number. I choose to have that amount of money. Now, in the next moment, you have nothing in the way of creating 10 times that amount of money. The question is, what actions do you need to take to create a new reality? Choosing is an active and creative commitment. Half-hearted decisions often lead to continued sufferings. It's kind of like, well, I'll do this just because of this and, to avoid this. And that all leads to that world of suffering. But if you're really creating the new reality that you want to create, then you take the necessary actions to transform the situation. Ultimately, suffering is optional. And remembering that suffering is optional gives you access to a vision and actions to fulfill on that vision at any given moment, no matter what life is throwing you. That's what being unmessable with really looks like. It's a state of mind where you are the creator, not trapped, not powerless, not the victim. You choose to be the creator and take the actions to create what hasn't happened yet. That's how you can free yourself from needless suffering. So I invite you to practice the choose it or change it philosophy. Once you choose something, you can create a new reality. But until you choose it, you're stuck reacting and suffering to whatever it is that you're dealing with or complaining about. So use complaints as an access to choice and creation. Complaints, choice, creation. See you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Be Unmessable with the podcast. I never take for granted that you've chosen to spend some time with me, and I am committed that you get value every time you do. So if you want to develop your Unmessable with muscle to create life versus react to it, click below in the show notes and we will get you into our free promise game process that will enable you to start creating what you want versus waiting for what you want. I look forward to hearing back from you on what you're creating, as well as future topics for the show that might support you in being unmessable with. See you next time.